The surprise attack that changed world history. December 7, 1941, at 7:48 a.m., a peaceful morning was about to turn into a nightmare. In just 90 minutes, over 2,000 Americans would lose their lives in a brutal assault. 4 massive battleships were sunk, dragging the United States into the deadliest war in human history. To understand this tragedy, we must look at the ambitions of the Japanese Empire in 1941. Japan was hungry for resources, invading China and pushing deep into Southeast Asia for oil and rubber. The United States disapproved of this aggression and decided to strike back economically. In July 1941, America froze Japanese assets and cut off 80% of their oil supply. This trade embargo was a death sentence for the Japanese military's mobility. Without oil, their ships and planes would have stopped moving within 2 short years. Japanese leaders felt backed into a corner with only 2 desperate choices. They could either apologize and withdraw from China, or seize oil-rich colonies by force. The empire chose war, but the US Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor stood in their way. Japan believed a single surprise blow could cripple America's ability to interfere for months. This would grant Japan the time needed to conquer Southeast Asia without opposition. The mastermind behind this audacious plan was the determined Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Yamamoto planned to send 6 aircraft carriers across 3,500 miles of ocean. The goal was to remain completely undetected and attack without a formal declaration of war. On November 26, 1941, the secret task force, Kido Butai, departed from Hitokapu Bay. This massive fleet included the Akagi, Kaga, Soyu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku carriers. Over 350 aircraft were carried, escorted by battleships and destroyers. For 12 days, the fleet maintained total radio silence to avoid detection. They sailed a northern route through freezing seas to avoid commercial shipping lanes. They were ghosts on the ocean, invisible to the American radar and scouts. By 6 a.m. on December 7, the fleet reached their launch point north of Oahu. The air was freezing and the tension among the Japanese pilots was palpable. The first wave of 183 aircraft roared off the carrier decks. In Hawaii, sailor Arjun was just waking up, completely unaware of the danger. Arjun was thinking about his Sunday breakfast while death flew toward him. At 7:48 a.m., the peace was shattered by the first bombs falling on the harbor. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida radioed the code, Tora, 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 to signal total surprise. Japanese planes dove low, targeting Battleship Row, where ships were sitting ducks. 8 American battleships, including the Arizona and Oklahoma, were in the line of fire. Torpedo bombers tore through the shallow waters, sending shocks through the ship's hulls. At 8:06 a.m., a bomb pierced the USS Arizona's forward ammunition magazine. The USS Arizona vanished beneath the waves, leaving a towering pillar of black smoke that choked the harbor sky. Nearby, the USS Oklahoma groaned under the weight of multiple torpedo hits, tilting dangerously to one side. The Oklahoma finally capsized, trapping hundreds of sailors in a terrifying, dark, and flooding metal tomb. Sailor Arjun scrambled through the chaos, dodging debris as he tried to help his wounded comrades reach safety. As the first wave of Japanese planes retreated, the American crews fought desperate fires to save their remaining ships. But the nightmare wasn't over. At 8:54 a.m., a second wave of 170 aircraft arrived over Oahu. These pilots shifted their focus to the airfields, diving steeply to destroy American planes before they could take off. Explosions ripped through the tarmac, turning rows of parked P-40 fighters into twisted heaps of burning metal. By 9:45 a.m., the roar of the engines faded as the Japanese strike force flew back toward their carriers. The silence that followed was haunting, broken only by the screams of the wounded and the crackle of fire. The toll was staggering. 2,403 Americans had lost their lives in just 2 hours. Among the dead were 68 civilians, caught in the crossfire of a war they never asked for. 4 massive battleships lay sunk, while 4 others were heavily damaged and barely afloat. 3 cruisers and 3 destroyers were reduced to ruins, leaving the Pacific Fleet crippled and broken. 188 aircraft were destroyed, most of them incinerated while sitting on the ground. On paper, Admiral Yamamoto had achieved a masterpiece of military precision and a total victory. Japan's losses were minimal, with only 29 aircraft and 64 servicemen lost in the raid. However, Yamamoto's triumph was hollow, as 2 critical flaws in the plan remained hidden. First, the Japanese fleet had failed to find the American aircraft carriers, which were not in port. The USS Enterprise, Lexington, and Saratoga were untouched and ready to strike back. Second, the Japanese decided against a third wave, leaving vital infrastructure completely intact. The fuel depots, repair shipyards, and the submarine base had survived the onslaught. This infrastructure was the heartbeat of the Navy, allowing the US to recover with shocking speed. The next morning, December 8, President Roosevelt addressed a stunned and silent Congress. His voice echoed with gravity as he declared December 7, a date which will live in infamy. The American mood shifted instantly from a desire for isolation to a burning rage for justice. Congress declared war on Japan almost unanimously, uniting a divided nation under one goal. Days later, Germany and Italy joined the fray, pulling America into the global fire of World War II. What was meant to be a knockout blow had instead awakened a sleeping giant of industrial power. American factories roared to life, producing thousands of ships, planes, and tanks at an impossible speed. This overwhelming production capacity turned the tide of the war in the Pacific and Europe. After 4 years of brutal fighting, Japan was forced into an unconditional surrender in September 1945. Pearl Harbor remains a powerful reminder of how a single morning of fire can reshape the entire world. It proved that while a surprise attack can win a battle, it cannot break the spirit of a determined nation. The tragedy of that day eventually led to a lasting peace, ensuring that the lessons of infamy would never be forgotten.